so we're gonna get started. We only have, we're gonna try and stop at 11:25, so we can all take a photo of it. And,
I would love that.
that'd be awesome.
We do too.
So I'm gonna start over here with, Lisa Lee? Lowe, and your son. And, what I would like is for everybody to give us your name, your pronoun, and your story, okay, your personal story. You got 2 minutes, everybody gets 2 minutes, okay? So we're gonna start over here.
Okay, my name is Lisa Lowe. This is my son, Critter, and I will try to do this as quickly as I can. I am a special needs and special education advocate on behalf of my son. When he was very young, he was bullied in elementary school, and as a result, without going into much detail, we did file a federal lawsuit against the school district. We are also Hispanic, and in discovery, we learned that there is a huge discrepancy of discrimination against minority special education students, and as much as 63% of minority special education students were reprimanded for behaviors out of their control. In his case, for behaviors as minor as blinking in class, flapping your hands. These things were happening statewide. We wouldn't have learned this without the lawsuit. It's a very high bar in Texas, but we won this lawsuit and found all kinds of incredible, devastating things. And one of the things that goes on, which looks good on paper, is mainstreaming special education students. Dropping it, the whole purpose of it is to integrate special needs students with able-bodied students to learn from each other, but that doesn't work if you don't have certified special education teachers in the classroom. And it's much easier to reprimand an autistic student or a special needs student in the classroom than to investigate what the actual issue is in the classroom. And we learned in his case, in the grade he was in, which was 4th grade, that 78% of the time, for the 4 months he was in 4th grade, he was isolated in a room.
By himself.
By himself. And obviously that needs to change, and I just wholeheartedly believe that special education reform is needed in this state. And then the other thing I did want to touch on is Medicaid expansion. And we were on a wait list for 11 years for Medicaid waivers. When he finally received his services, he has blossomed with these waivers, getting incredible services that are needed by so many families that most cannot afford. Everything from horseback therapy, aquatic, recreational, music, not to mention medical, dental, that sort of thing. He has now had them for about 4 years. That wait list is now 26 years long, and you cannot get your child on that list until they are 6 years old, which means services they need now, they can't get until they're in their 30s. And it's kind of, and there's 155,000 medically fragile children in this state on that wait list right now.
How many?
Over 155,000. And that we have to do so much better than that. So with that said, Christopher did want to say something really quick for your speech up, please. Christopher is also a special needs superhero, the Cranio Kid.
Okay.
And this is what he tells other special needs kids. He's had 40 plus surgeries.
Hi, I'm a Cranio Kid. I'm also a special needs kid that was bullied in elementary school. I want to let all special needs kids know that being unique is what makes us special. It will get better. Just look at me. Don't change who you are for someone else. Don't be embarrassed if you're bullied. stand up to that bully because you're the boss of you. So bullies when you're made up through your words. You won't be pushed around anymore. We need to stop bullying all over the world once and for all. Who's with me? If you agree with me, say, I'm bully free. I'm bully free.
I'm bully
Bully free, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay, now we're gonna
Great
move to
friend.
Benay and Isaac. If you could please, give us your pronouns and a personal history.
My name is Renee, she and her. This is Isaac Jacobs, my son, he and him. Isaac is 18 years old and currently enrolled in Austin Public School District at Aikens High School. Isaac is an avid soccer fan, rooting for Austin FC locally and Manchester United internationally. Isaac was born with a rare genetic condition called Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. It currently impacts 1 in 380,000 children. And to Lisa's effect, saying, for Medicaid expansion and health coverage and wait lists, I share in those same sentiments. I almost like to equate it to going to a restaurant and not knowing that there's a secret menu. A lot of special needs parents, we're not familiar with what options are out there. And just one, being educated on what's available, and then understanding the complexity of the wait list. Isaac was on the Medicaid waivers wait list for 8 years before he was eligible for services, and we are still currently on wait lists for county programs such as CLASS. And he's been on those wait lists since he was 3, so we're now at 15 years of waiting for county level support that is going to be crucial when he graduates or ages out of the MDCP program. One of our biggest advocacy efforts, being a newbie to this political arena, is really emphasizing the need for the expansion of universal health care, Medicaid reimbursement, especially as it pertains to rare diseases. We have University of Pennsylvania right now, they have an orphan disease center that is doing genetic testing for gene replacement therapy. And they have told our patient population that it's roughly gonna cost $20 million for them to get through clinical trials. And with such a small patient population for this rare disease, it's not beneficial or profitable for big pharmaceuticals to get involved. And so we're in a position where healthcare for profit is essentially killing our kids and neglecting providing them treatment. We're just in general maintenance. What can we do just to get from one day to the next? And Isaac's condition is commonly misdiagnosed as cerebral palsy. So people look at the physical limitations and say, okay, let's put him in a wheelchair, let's get him some physical therapy, some occupational therapy. But there are self-injurious behaviors that come with his disease that are very unique to Lesch-Nyhan, where my son every day tries to figure out a way to harm himself, either physically or emotionally, or by attacking other people so that they in turn will become angry and attack him. And so it's really crucial that there become a heightened focus for rare diseases, and when there is an opportunity for universities and medical teams to provide services, that we've got the right funding at the state and federal levels to support those efforts.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Isaac. Yeah, it's really helpful to hear.
Amy and Linda? Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Amy Witzinger. I'm
A self-advocate.
I was on the waiting list for about 8 years, a long time ago. I've been able to make use of my services and my education to get a triple major in undergrad here in Texas, and I also have a master's in theology. But I want to say that, had I been born a couple years later or moved to Texas a couple years later, this wouldn't have been possible, because education for people with disabilities has really changed, and that's scary for me. That it's just a matter of time between the quality of the inclusion that I would have gotten and the quality of education that I would have gotten. For it to change that drastically is scary. And now I'm working on all the medical health transition parts for young adults, and making sure that we can stay in our community that we've been well prepared for with attendance. So the waiting list and the attendant wages are really important to me.
Thanks for sharing that.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm Amy's mother. We came to Texas about 25 years ago, transferred by the corporation that my husband and I worked for, and he was also in the Army National Guard on weekends. And so when Texas moves so many people here, they need to take care of everybody that they move. I mean, they incentivize it, and so that's one thing that we noticed. And we also came to a state that really silos everything. So you can have one bucket of money if you have intellectual disability, but if you have physical disability, it's a different bucket, and it only pays the attendants half as much. And so it's traumatic to find attendants. We feel that we're old, that we're gonna leave her in a situation where her plan doesn't cover a roof over your head or a way to always have enough attendance, because the pay is $4 less than fast food. And so that's a problem. And Amy works, but she receives a lot of care that's very necessary and very expensive, so that she might have to earn 6 digits in order to do it all herself. And so there's all these rules with Social Security and state rules about what you're allowed to earn, and they're confusing, and there's nobody in Texas that's explaining it well enough so that you can just make it all work. So I guess that would be my story. And thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
Vicky?
Hi, I'm Nikki Boyd. I'm from she, her. I'm with the DAP. I grew up here. I'm in Texas. I'm in a small town next to an institution. I was actually in 2 different institutions, Mississippi and North Carolina. So when I came and chose to get out of that small town, because as I aged out, the only option that was given to me was to go back into an institution. That was not an option. I chose to be homeless in Austin. I luckily found ADAPT, which I started in it when I was 19. I'm 45. I consider myself very organized, but I go off a lot of what ADAPT has taught me through life. I go back. I'm a single mother. I travel all over the United States fighting for disability rights and parents' rights in the state. There's no states that have any disability parents' right, meaning we can not discriminate against age, race, sexuality, all of these things, but yet we can still discriminate. My son was taken away simply because I was disabled. And a small town judge felt like that was okay. And in the end, I got my kid back, but it took 9 years and a lot of hard work. And I was already an activist. So I was like, how could this happen to me? I know all my rights. I fight. I've been to DC thousands of times, and it happened to me. So I'm a fighter. I guess I'm born that way. I will die that way. And I just really believe that people should have the choice to be in the community. Look, if you want to be there, that should be a choice. Shouldn't be that's the only guarantee that a disabled person has when they're born, or when they, eventually I tell people, you're an able body now, but that's only entitlement for a short time. And that's one thing that does not discriminate is disability, as you know. You worked with our people many a times. And disability does not discriminate. But when you have your disability, you become in a whole nother world. Yeah. You become a whole nother fight. You have to have a whole nother brain system train of thought. And so I've lived that life. And I've always fought housing, attendant care. I want to live in the community, and I will, no matter what it will take, because I've had that. See, and I'm also a big believer. I've been in an institution, but I've gotten that taste of freedom, and I won't let it go.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, the moderator. My name is Renee Lopez, and I am 60 years old. I grew up in the dark ages of special education back in the 60s. I went to the University of Texas and got my bachelor's and my master's degree, and then I worked for 30 years for the state of Texas. And now I spend my time that I'm retired being an advocate for just about anything, for housing, attendant care, higher wages for attendants, you know, things like that. So that's why I'm here. Everything that we're going to talk about is very important to me. I grew up with a disability, so I've seen the changes, and I know what life is like before the ADA. So anyway, so in the interest of time, we're going to get on to the next question, first question. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Nikki. You have a question for Bethel you'd like to ask?
Well, I did. It goes into, so what would you do about the fact, because you know every state, somewhere there has to be a first state that takes that initial, so that every state we can use that as an example to follow suit. What would you do to, one, bring awareness to the fact that disabled parents are getting their kids taken away? I mean, hearing, blind, I mean, they come up with all kinds of excuses, and they're just not legit. They're not legit at all. So I guess, where would you start, and how would you even, because we have so many other things that we're fighting for, as you know.
That's right. That's right. You know, I think it begins with what you just did, which is educating me on this. I didn't understand how much of a problem this is in Texas, and as you pointed out, in the rest of the country, because no state has yet taken the leadership on this. What I do know is that we have a terrible problem within Child Protective Services and our foster care system right now. And a big part of the cause of that problem is that we're taking kids out of their families and putting them in to CPS care or foster care with another family altogether, when what we know from the experts and from the families themselves, if we'll just listen to them, is if we can find a way to keep that child with their family, their prospects, their development, their outcomes, their opportunities are going to be so much better. So as governor, that's going to be my focus, to include parents who have a disability, who perhaps in the past have had their children taken from them because of that disability. And perhaps not from malice, but from judges and those in positions of authority who just don't understand what you just shared with me, which is so important. So that's the beginning of it. And I hope to be able to connect others with what you just shared so that we have the political will to actually make these changes. And so I want to thank you for this. And Nikki, I'm going to ask you, if we're in this position to serve the people of Texas, to help me make this case to others, because only a minority of Texans have experienced what you have.
Right.
And so we've got to reach the majority so that they empathize and understand with what you've gone through. And then also see it in their self-interest. Do we want to continue to prop up a system of CPS that, despite the best intention of those workers who are amazing, laboring under tough conditions at very low pay, and you know that as a former state employee, they're in a system that is almost designed to fail. And I think you can help make the case that we can redesign that system so that it is set for success. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. Linda?
Okay, I think Amy and I would like to bring up voting, please.
The original bill in the spring was SB 8, and it had some strange things in it, like a poll tax, where if you were young and you didn't have SSDI, you were going to have to go to the doctor every year for a note in order to vote by mail. And so we got that poll tax taken out. But now it says you may have assistance if, only if, you can't read or you can't write. There are so many more disabilities, and you can, the oath says that a relative can help without taking an oath. But if you're a college kid and you have a disability and you don't have a relative in your dorm, and you are deaf but you know who can sign and you want them with you while you vote for the first time, you ought to be able to get to do it, and so forth. And Amy, sometimes we pull up and we have to do curbside because the ramp, there's no space for the ramp. And so they bring this little box out and they put it up on your lap, and it's gonna fall right off her lap. I mean, that's help. sometimes when she's voting by mail, she stuffs it in the envelope, but you can't put the flap down, or she needs help with the return address. That's not really helping with voting, but it's so prescriptive in some ways and so vague in other ways. So, what do you think the recourse would be about these voting problems? Do you want to add anything to that?
And how would you make sure that whatever was created included people with disabilities and looking for the solution?
It's interesting when I listen to what you and everyone around the table has shared with me, it strikes me that almost no matter what we're talking about, the disability community is disproportionately impacted. So on special ed, the challenges that we have with resources and the treatment of children with special needs and the failure to fund that appropriately or provide oversight or staffing in the classroom, that's within a system that is already failing Texas children generally. During the power grid failure of a year ago, I mean, it hit more than 10 million Texans, but those with disabilities or who had medical devices that kept them alive, they were the ones who, more likely than not, were the ones who died or suffered from this. And when it comes to voting, this election law, which functionally and effectively seeks to disenfranchise many different groups of voters, targets and attacks voters with disabilities perhaps more than anyone else. And so, first and foremost, we have to reverse that law and make sure that if you are a U.S. citizen and an eligible voter, that there's no obstacle in your place to cast a ballot. And I'm so glad that you brought up the poll tax, because the first version of that election bill was going to require you to go to a doctor in the least insured state in America to prove your disability, including for veterans who may not want to talk about or relive that experience. But we've got to do more than just reversing the bad stuff. We've also got to make sure that we make progress on the good stuff. So things like automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, and trusting those with disabilities to make their own decisions about who it is will assist them on filling out that ballot or registering to vote in the first place. I think that's just that's not a Democratic Party deal. That's a Texas value, right? I heard the word independence come up earlier. We fiercely value that here in this state. Let's make sure that we actually act it in our election laws. And then, Amy, I don't think there can be any discussion or solution or policy proposal made about you without you. You absolutely got to be at the table. And in the same way that I asked Nikki to assist on issues involving parents with disabilities, we'd love to have your help in making sure that we rewrite our election laws so that they're truly fair. And I can't also help but think of, Linda, when you mentioned that poll tax, the reason that it got pulled from the final bill was because of the advocacy of the people in this room and in the disability community. I was there at the hearings in the legislature across the street, and I saw Texans with disabilities in some cases drive hundreds of miles to appear before the Senate and House committees. And then I saw Republican members of the House and the Senate come off their dais and sit down and talk with people who are going to be impacted. It actually works. And sometimes our cynicism gets the best of us, and we fail to participate thinking that the thing's already cooked or rigged. It's not, it requires our participation. So your question and more importantly, your action are pretty inspiring to me, and that's how we're going to change this for the better.
Thank you. Renee Lopez, you have a question?
I will say it's more of an ask or a statement than a question. I appreciate you bringing up the fact that this is not a Democratic issue, Republican issue. It's a Texas value issue. There is a spectrum of the disability and special needs population that spans political spectrum. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democratic or independent. And so my ask or question for commitment from you is, how much can you help also emphasize the need for advocating all the way down the ballot? Because we are in a non-presidential election, but there are still members who are vying for candidacy at the local level, which we have, school boards and city officials that are making decisions about the school funding, that are making decisions about access rights. We have county level judges. that are the people that we're gonna have to go to as we pursue guardianship of our children who are now becoming adults. Also legal matters on what they can own that won't, offset their Medicaid benefits, as well as those federal and national representatives who can help make that push for universal health care. So we are strongly supporters of your candidacy and excited about what you can do for Texas, but I want to just ensure that we've got that message that we need representation from top to bottom, because a lot of these decisions are made closer to the chest than they are at the federal level.
Here are a couple thoughts, and perhaps a proposal, which I hope, Cynthia, you'll make a note of, so that we can get back to everybody after talking to our policy team and others who might have an interest in this. One, just as I learned so much listening to Nikki about what happens to parents with disabilities and their children, and everyone else who's brought up an issue right now that I didn't know about. You mentioned the secret menu that some parents can order from in the state of Texas because some other parent has made them wise to the fact that, hey, when your kid turns 6, there's this special wait list that you've never heard about. You need to get on it because it takes you more than 20 years in some cases to get the services that your taxpayer dollars, by the way, have funded and you deserve as a resident of this state. Making sure that more people actually know that those things exist, understand the injustice of making anybody wait that long or that critical a service. That's something that I should be doing more of as a candidate, given the fact that I've got a microphone that reaches a lot of people, a Twitter account that has 2 million followers. And so just even out of this meeting, Cynthia, I'd love for us to have something on our social media platforms that share some of these stories. And some of the reason that we're recording today is to do just that, is to amplify stories and raise awareness. Here's the proposal that will require some work on our part and your part if we're gonna get this done. But what if there were a pledge or a commitment that school board to gubernatorial candidates could take that has the goal of ensuring the independence of each and every single Texan, the equal treatment in schools, in housing, in employment, in parental rights, that will be impacted whether you're on the city council, the commissioner's court, the state legislature, or really any position of power in public trust. And to do so, and we should add voting to that, and to do so in a way that's really simple for us to understand. Because I'll be honest, as you know, I have a special needs sister who we found out about that 20-year wait list when she was 18 years old and graduated from high school, and the counselor said, oh, by the way, there's this list you should get on. And my mom said it'd be nice if we knew about that 18 years ago. But helping us to convey this sometimes very complex and probably on purpose complex stuff in a simple, straightforward way that the average candidate and the average voter can appreciate and understand. And I think that not only helps us to elect people who have these same values, these Texas values we just talked about, but it also gives us a tool for enforcement or accountability, where we say, hey, Beto, you took this pledge when you were a candidate, and now you're governor, and I want to know where you are on these issues. Where's the progress report? We met with you back in February of 2022 when you were running, and you said you were going to do this stuff. Now we're in February of 2023. Tell me where you're at. So I really like the idea of doing that. I've seen other organizations who have organized around and advocated for certain policy outcomes, which would be really effective in making sure that candidates know what their expectations are, and maybe even sign on the dotted line and say, I am going to make sure that we get this done. I'm confident that ADAPT has already probably produced something like this, but we would love to be part of that process, or at a minimum, just have a chance as a candidate to be asked to get behind a specific set of policy goals that we can help implement as governor. So thank you for the question. I think that's the way that we got to meet this challenge. Most Texans just don't understand what is happening. And I think most Texans are kind-hearted people, are good people who see how this makes sense for all of us. they just need to be told the story, shared the facts, and educated. And I want to help do that as a candidate. So Cynthia, I know you made note of all this. Let's just make sure that we follow through on it.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up, Lisa made the comment earlier that there was, over 150,000 people that are waiting. And that's 150,000 people, to your point, that know about the wait list, that
That's
know
right.
about the system. And so in Isaac's situation, we were very dependent upon either teachers in the school district when he started PPCD at the age of 3, or some of his pediatricians educating us and, oh, by the way, I had another patient who had this, so do this. And so if it weren't for that network that we came across and having a doctor who was actually familiar with his disease in our city, not having to travel hours, to see somebody who knows about his condition, they were able to inform us. And so we want to do our part to help pass along the message. And unfortunately, I think that means that wait list is going to grow, again, if we don't have the right people at every level that's prepared locally to advocate the money specifically for these needs, at the state level to accept the federal reimbursement funds, and at the federal level to say that this is important enough to carve it out of the budget. So I appreciate your commitment.
A few of us just did the math, and it's really 90-year list now, because we looked at how many slots have come off over the last 20 years.
No problem.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, and a lot, all of us know, a lot of this is word of mouth, that you find this stuff. A lot of us don't find this stuff out from even the medical community. Another thing on that special menu is that parents ourselves can become attendants. In our case, we can't afford to bring in outside help. I am Critter's mom, I'm also his guardian, I'm also his attendant. And there are so many complex rules that it would be just incredible for, if there were somebody special appointed, on staff to, just for the disability community, to explain, for instance, he is finally, because we made it through the wait list, he's on the class program. Now that he's 21, I think it's called the Class Plus program now, which was a whole different set of rules, and still waiting to hear on disability benefits. But his grandmother wanted to set up a trust for him, but then we found out, well, he can't actually get a certain amount of funds each month. He can't get a job. He can't, because he'll lose all these other benefits. It's extremely confusing.
Yeah.
There are so many things we'd love for him to be able to do to gain his own independence, but there are a lot of roadblocks legally to do that. And, it would be incredible if there was somebody just set aside, because there are so many Texans with disabilities, and it is a very confusing roadmap on how to deal with this. And the transition from pediatric to adult, it's a lot. It's just a lot. And, for many of us, and I know Linda and Benet understand this too, we do what we do because we love our children. I was a paralegal in my previous life. I am his mother first and his advocate, because if we don't advocate for our kids, then who will? And this is what I choose to do, and I'm very happy to do that. But it would be lovely to have help to navigate all this. Now that we do have our services, one of the great things that came from it during the winter storm last year, he went 4 nights. He also has long COVID. He went 4 nights without his BiPAP machine because we lost power. But because we now finally had these services, we did have nurses calling every single day to check on him. They couldn't physically come out because the roads were blocked and everything else, but we had that lifeline of medical staff calling to check, to give us advice on what to do, how to keep warm. We were making candle ovens inside our home,
What's a candle oven?
Okay, so you get big candles, you take a terracotta pot and put it upside down over the candles. It works. We were huddled.
And that's how you
in
stay
the
warm?
room. Yeah, we made several candle ovens. Just the advice that they gave us, was
really incredible. So that was just a very small thing that happened, but it was, dare I say, life-saving. I mean, I was freaking out. I was scared to death because, you know, we didn't know what else to do. You know, body-to-body contact throughout the night. He didn't have his breathing machine with him, and even getting, you know, the dogs with us, just as many bodies as possible, just to keep everything going. So, yeah, these services are incredible. I don't know, Medicaid expansion would also help with attendant pay. I think Texas ranks 48th as far as healthcare provider pay, which is really abhorrent, you know, when, especially when it's the parent having to do everything. So, but yeah, that's another thing. A lot of parents don't know about the special menu, that you can be your own child's attendant, which is what we have to do. So, yeah, a disability committee would be incredible.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I really, really like that.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I keep asking you to make note of commitments and then follow-ups, but I wonder if you just want to take a minute to share some of your story as a parent and somebody who's obviously key to this campaign and to what we're trying to do. And any thoughts you have about what we could do better as what I could do better as a candidate, what we could do better as a campaign.
So this is very near and dear to my heart. I have worked for Beta going on 10 years, and my son, Isaac, as well. He's on the autism spectrum. And so all these stories, it's exactly what we're going through, and he's an adult right now, so we're trying to navigate the system that is incredibly confusing. Both my husband and myself have a college degree, and we struggle to try to, you know, figure out what is within his rights to maintain the programs that he has without losing them. Because as you both had mentioned, it's very, very challenging. And so, you know, we ended up claiming bankruptcy at one point because we did not qualify where we were on the list. And we were trying to, you know, provide all the services we could for him, did not have any financial help. And so we ended up, we were like, I think $50,000 to $60,000 in debt before we could actually qualify, because he'd made it on the list. And it's just, you know, as a young parent, when my son was first diagnosed, I had no idea what services, systems, exactly. It was another parent that told me, hey, guess what, you should get him on this list because it's gonna take you 15 to 20 years. And it did take us that long to get on the list. And so, you know, as a young parent trying to first deal with your child having a major significant disability and then the financial component to it, devastating, absolutely devastating. And so, this is, and I'm even getting a little emotional because it just means so much to me, you know, what you guys are doing and fighting. And it's the parents that really do the hard work, that you get in there and you educate yourself and find out exactly what you need to do. And so thank you for taking the time to do this. We will make sure to follow up with this. I know, as Beto mentioned, he has a sister with a disability, so very, very near to our heart about making sure that some of these changes happen, because, you know, my son Isaac, who is going to college right now, and he's trying to figure out, he wants to contribute, he wants to get a job. I want that for him so desperately, so that he's not on the system for the rest of his life, so that he's able to give back to the community, and I think that's all any of us want.
I like the idea that Lisa proposed of some kind of council or committee or advisory body that, not just on the policy, which is critically important because these are the things we have to change to improve quality of life in Texas and just the performance of the state overall. It's to all of our benefit. But even as a campaign, you know, how we conduct events, what it is we're talking about, when we talk about voting rights, whose voting rights are we talking about? When we talk about expanding Medicaid, what does that mean to different people in different communities or different families in the state? So I think that would be really helpful. I know that you and Lynn, who's behind you, helped us to set this meeting up, could take the lead on that and make sure that we are able to take advantage of everybody who wants to contribute right now. I think that's a huge asset for the state of Texas. And you know, now that everyone's learned the secrets, including the menus and everything, let's share that with everybody else in Texas. So I look forward to seeing that come together.
Beto, I do have a question I wanted to bring up,
Please.
and it's something that's very important to me, and it's about attendant care. And right now, as you know, I'm sure you've heard that wages are still at minimum wage. You know, they're you can get paid $15 an hour to flip a hamburger than you can to help a person with a disability. And eventually it's reached a crisis point, as you probably know. We cannot get attendance out there at all. There's nobody to call, even the agencies themselves struggle with trying to find attendance. And a lot of it is because of the low pay. And many of us at ADAPT met with the commissioner of HHS, and she was not very helpful and had no suggestions, had no idea, even when we asked her what you can do about it, she was like, I don't know, you know, which is not the kind of question, actually you wouldn't hear from someone who's a commissioner. But anyway, so what could you do in the, you know, when you become governor to help increase the wages for attendants? Because they really, nobody wants to do this job if you can't live off the money, you know, that you could make. And so they need a livable wage.
Yeah, absolutely. How could we expect them to work this job without
Why would they, you know?
without a living wage? And anyone who does this job right now certainly isn't doing it for the money. They're doing it because they, like everyone here, wants to care for and help improve the outcomes of people in this state. So for those home health care attendants who in any way receive directly or indirectly state support, we have some leverage there, right? And we need to increase that support so that they have that living wage and those jobs are competitive. Because right now, with unemployment getting a little bit lower, with the job market being a little bit more competitive, we're gonna have to offer something that is exciting to people who have a lot of other options right there. Second, we need to make sure that as a state, we fund the education of those who are willing to work in the kind of in-demand professions that are so often underserved like this. So at a time that, Amy, I don't know what your costs were and indebtedness was to pursue higher education. Probably anyone in this room who went to pursue higher education took on some level of debt. I did as well. Took me years to pay that back. Well, if you took on that debt and you're willing to work in one of these jobs, even if that debt was taken to get your certification or your associate's degree, much less your 4-year or master's, why doesn't the state of Texas underwrite that? So that not only are you getting paid more, Isaac, but you're not paying back the debt that you incurred in order to take on a job that is so necessary and benefits so many people across the state. So those are two ways where, you know, the state of Texas is involved directly or indirectly. Let's raise pay. And then where we can underwrite the education of those who are willing to work in this profession, let's do it to zero cost to the person who's willing to work that job. That makes a ton of sense to me. But I'm very, very open to other ideas. And as I said to Amy earlier, there are no solutions or policies or progress without the people at this table. I want to make sure that we are listening and following the guidance of those who will live the outcomes of these policies more than anyone else. But those are some ideas that I want to bring to the table as well.
Yeah, and just to mention that Adaptive Texas has been working on this issue for like, how long, 10 years now? And
Actually longer.
probably
And
longer.
we are the reason why attendance got brought up to minimum wage. There for a while, they weren't even making minimum wage until we threw a fit. Hey, it's against the law technically. Of course, Texas, yeah. But we kept being that, so, okay, they're at minimum wage, but we're still at minimum wage. But I also wanted to really point out, as I hear everybody's story, I want you to acknowledge that, or I know you do, Texas still has 13, quote, institutions. The Department of Justice on a federal level has been telling us for over 2 decades to shut them down. You know, 2 decades it was shut 1 or 2. Now they've like shut them all down. We just keep ignoring it. But really hearing everybody's story, I really can't help but to hear the system is so still set up in the year 2022 for us to be institutionalized, no matter what age, no matter what part of life you're at, our system is set up as an institution. Whether it be housing, in attendance, that don't want this job. When I say, hey, come work for me, please, at $8.11. And look, let's be serious. I'm on the class program too, and I'm glad y'all got it. But 10 years ago, that was the thing. Nowadays, that's only $12. That's still not competing with Buc-ee's. That's still not competing with Dairy Queen. So even at the top of waiting 20 years to get on these waiting lists and these silos, you're still behind. You're still behind. And it is a system that is designed, and we still have not even approached that system that is designed to flow us into these nursing homes and institutions where they make all the money off of us. We've already proven time after, and I'm sorry guys, I'm not meaning to take over, but we have proven that it costs so much less, even if we pay New York attendant prices, which is up in the $30 an hour. So if we pay that, that still is cheaper for us to live in the community, be productive part of society, and we still continue to force people into institutions. So even the math, when we bring it to the math on the table, not just our opinions, the facts, they just look at us.
Okay, we're at 5 minutes. Bethel, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
This is really helpful, Renee. All of these stories and ideas and your passion and the urgency that you bring to this, it's not going to change otherwise. And my challenge or my job, my responsibility is to convey what you have shared with me with voters across the state of Texas who may or may not themselves have a disability or be able to see themselves in your place, but who you just made a great fiscal argument that applies to all of us. If all you care about, if you didn't care a single thing about a single life in this room, but you just cared about your taxes or the cost of government, you just made the case that paying an attendant a living wage is a lot cheaper for me as a taxpayer than funding somebody in institutional care in one of these 13 places that, as you make the point, should be shut down by the federal government. That plus what I do know will catch the attention and the hearts of the people of Texas, these stories about what we're doing to folks and what we're preventing in terms of their ability to realize their potential and their promise in their lives. That can be galvanizing and motivating, and it can produce the political will to get some of these changes, not just to win elections. Really important that we win, right? Because we don't do any of this stuff if we don't win, but winning is insufficient to the task at hand. We also have to then persuade a majority of the legislature, and really through them, the voters who elected them, that these are important issues and that they rank up there with everything else that candidates talk about, that those in elected office focus on, so that we actually make some change. Because the worst thing in the world, you mentioned the 90-year waiting list, is to be back here 4 years from now talking about the same things that haven't changed and whether or not we're going to actually do something this time. It sounds like you've had that conversation before. And,
Only for over half my life.
Yes.
There you go. And as someone put it better than I ever could, so many are so sick and tired of being sick and tired and want to see change. And we absolutely have to do what we can with what we have, where we are right now, to produce that change. And you've got my commitment to do that and my genuine interest in working together. I'm not going to do this for you, and I don't think anyone's asking me to do anything for anybody. But what I do think I hear you saying is that we want to do this together, and you want to be a partner, and I want to be your partner as well. And so this, I hope, is the start of something really big and really positive. And I want to thank Lisa, who reached out to us early on and said, hey, next time you're in Austin, this is the kind of conversation we should be having. Renee for convening and hosting us, and you all for being willing to share your stories, and for Isaac for coming to so many of our rallies and making us smile and cheering us on and creating some really good energy that pumps a lot of people up.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Isaac. You're amazing, and feel very, very lucky to be doing this with you all. And thank you. Yeah, so kind and so polite as well. And Critter, I agree with you. You're a superhero, man, and we're gonna follow your lead. And you asked us at the end of what you read to be in this with you, and we will be. And you're pretty inspiring. So we're grateful to you and your mom for bringing us all together. So Thank you. And Renee, if you're okay with it, I would love to take a picture with everyone
Okay.
to commemorate
Well,
this
you
and
gotta
share
put
it.
over there. Okay.
Yeah, and share it so that we can share some of these stories. Cynthia and Chris,